Alright folks, and welcome back to this little project of mine. We are going to continue on laying Windows 98. No, we're not. We're going to continue this little Windows Update project, laying Windows ME over the top of Windows 98. So for the most part, things have gone pretty flawless up to this point. ME was the next major update after Windows 98. So we're going to go that and then on to Windows 2000 once this one completes. So for the most part, everything remains the same, no major changes, and we can move right into the upgrade process. So we'll just start Windows 98 up. Which, as you can see, takes a few minutes. Considering I've been moving this at some speed, you'll find sometimes that there are extra final updates for the system to do between upgrade processes, so we'll get those out of the way as well. But for the most part, this is the last of the 9X series before Windows moved into a more NT platform. So that being said, we'll just finish waiting for it to load, and then we will crack on. So as you can see, Windows 98 is loaded. Don't need that. I'm just going to mess about with a couple of the settings here, mostly because I'm odd. I want to add the standard Windows sound theme. Something I think the newer versions missed, to be honest. Don't want to save that, apply that. Okay, and now we can begin the upgrade process. We'll launch autoplay. As before, it tells us new version, do we want to upgrade? Of course we do. Again, this is the ME install version. Upgrade version, I should say. This is the last time that this process was separate. As far as I know, the upgrade system was bundled right into newer operating systems. So you no longer needed one version or the other. Even though full installs were possible with an upgrade version. And again, this one is a little bit longer, just over an hour to install completely. So Windows will do its thing, it will do its pre-tests, check the drive, things like that. It looks like it's stuck, but it's not. This process can just take a while. And for the time involved, it wasn't worth cutting those particular parts out. So again, we're still running on VirtualBox, that hasn't changed. 512 mega RAM, 32-bit graphics card, so no major changes to the hardware configuration. We are simply telling the operating system that everything is okay. And now we will put in the serial key. It should just take a minute. And we will then continue on and get into the upgrade process itself. A lot of people give ME grief, and a lot opted to stay on 98 2nd edition. I personally never had any issues with Windows ME. Everything seemed to run fine for me, and I used ME for a majority of my younger years. So we're not keeping system files, or as I've said before, it gives us an issue later. Plus we won't be downgrading anyway. We don't need a startup disk. So we'll just cancel out of that. So a lot of the thinking behind ME was 98, but with more media applications. It had improved media player. It came with a whole bunch of things. The biggest being the early versions of Windows Movie Maker, which was passable at best, especially if you only did small edits to videos. For bigger ones, obviously, you had to shell out for higher end software. Windows ME also brought in System Restore, which all of us know how much of a godsend that can be. And the registry and last known good configurations were brought in as well, which saved a few reinstalls for a lot of us, I think. They improved the file system protections to stop people tampering with core Windows files. A lot of viruses and Trojans, things like that, tend to go there. They improved TCP/IP, so networking was supposed to be simpler and faster and more effective. Unfortunately, in the late 90s, it was still a pain in the backside and required miles and miles of cable. They updated plug and play. Allowed the system to open and close ports on its own. Perhaps not the most secure of methods, but it was for home networking, so they built the Windows image acquisition for devices like cameras, webcams, scanners, all that was beginning to take off, and to simplify a lot of the drivers that we had to install. Man, some of it was a nightmare. Obviously, Windows ME came with a host of new drivers, updated drivers, better drivers. Probably the largest support to date for peripherals at the time. Windows ME also started automatic update, so we weren't constantly having to check Windows Update, and it would download them in the background and then tell us when it was ready. They improved the inbuilt zip support. We got the picture viewer. That was really strange. Like, until then, thumbnails were practically unheard of, but ME brought that in, so that was cool. They improved Pinball, Spider Solitaire, Minesweeper. God, how many of us remember those? It also had the generic USB driver as well, so that you didn't need custom drivers for USB stuff. It's very strange. Windows ME was released in September of 2000 and has the shortest life cycle of any Microsoft OS. So it's very strange. Very strange at the time. But that was the market back then. Unfortunately, ME was unstable and had its issues that it really did take Microsoft a while to get a handle on. So that kind of sucked, but for the most part, ME was always good to me, and I look back rather fondly, if I'm honest. I also had autocomplete, which was in its early days as well. It also had a massive amount of improvements to cold boot so that Windows ME started up faster than anything to date, but that's just how it was. ME shipped with Media Player 7. That's going back some. I think my most used media player was probably 9. And now I don't even use it, so... ME also had a new version of the DVD, built-in DVD player. Also had direct play voice. So sadly most of us still remember it being dial-up, but ME may have been on the outer edges of ADSL technologies as well. Also out of ME they took a lot of the unnecessary NT stuff away. ME was marketed at home users rather than business, so most businesses by this point were moving on to NT4 or gearing up for Windows 2000, so they took things like the personal web server, Active Directory client, resource kit, all those things were removed from ME. The fact software never worked, or I don't remember it ever working or ever even needing to install it. But yeah, I mean, it always was alright for me. It's always apparently based on the removal of real mode DOS. But each to their own, I guess. I mean, we all have that one thing we do or don't like, so it's just how the world works. Alright, so having evaluated this a little bit, I took a chunk of the install section out. About another 20 minutes before it went from 17 to 98%. But that saves me a lot boring people rambling aimlessly. And we can just get on with the next part of this. So Windows has now finished installing, and we can just reboot, move on to the next part. It was always the thing with installing Windows back then. It took forever. Much quicker nowadays. I can do Windows 10 in about half an hour. So right now, as before with Windows 98, this will now look for plug and play hardware, software, all that. Install the inbuilt drivers. Of course, most of us did that, and then we'd pull the motherboard disk out and install those, and then the graphics driver and the sound card driver. For me, it was literally a 3-day job to install from scratch and get everything back on and back up and running. It's still quite a while even now. Having recently switched to an SSD, had to do a reinstall, and well, I'm still not finished. So we're just going to wait for the drivers to install, and then it should reboot again. So as you can see, it looks like it's stuck, but the hard drive light's actually on, so it's clearly doing something. And as long as there was hard drive activity, then you could mostly ignore the GUI stuff. And we're rebooting again. I think this is one of those rare times it may have actually crashed. Or it's gotten stuck on the install process. So I'm going to have to do a hard reset, I think. Just to get us back up and running. And sometimes it happened. Could be something in the upgrade path, it could be... well, I'm not sure really. I think I'm just gonna hard reboot. It may not have done, but there's no activity on the hard drive light, so... but the bar's still moving, the animation. Not really sure what's going on. Oh no, there we are, there we go. It's just been slow. Sometimes it does that, it's just a little bit slow off the mark. It's the curse of the x86 architecture, I guess, in a lot of ways. Alright, so it's going to continue looking for plug and play hardware. So now it's setting up various little bits and pieces. This process is fairly straightforward. We will just let this finish up. Finalizing the configuration, so hopefully this will be pretty quick. So each piece of this is pretty quick. It's updating the registry, updating file locations, adding in new files, updating old ones, that kind of thing. So making those changes from Windows 98 to Windows ME. Of course, our drive still has DOS on it, but Windows ME no longer requires it. Again, part of these restrictions are because we're only running on 512 meg of RAM, so the process is a little slow, but without tampering with INI files and system files, things like that, you can't get Windows naturally accept more than 512 anyways. Obviously the motherboard's really what decided how much RAM. In theory, an x86 system should be able to take 4 gig anyways, but Windows gets a little temperamental above 512, or the earlier ones anyway. We should be able to increase that as we move on to Windows 2000. For these purposes, I tend to use 2 gig with Windows 2000 and then the full 4 with Windows XP. There were other constraints as well, like onboard graphics and things like that, so I think this one's essentially using a separate one. Or at least that's how VirtualBox is qualifying it. So we're getting there, slowly but surely now. So we're almost there, just waiting for this process to finish. Which is always good about Windows, a lot of it's automated, doesn't require any intervention from us. Aside from the initial parts anyway. Not quite sure what that was. Alright, 3 minutes remaining, so as this process wraps up, it should reboot and we should be all but done for this one. And then it should go into the hardware configuration process afterwards. You know, it amazes me that at this point my phone probably has more power than Windows ME, which is kind of strange. Just shows how far technology has come since 1999. So we're almost there, less than a minute. There we go. And it should now want to reboot, which we'll do momentarily. Even if you left it, the whole little bar would auto reboot anyways. And it should reboot into the installing hardware setup. Which means we have about 5 minutes of this process left. I honestly don't remember ME ever taking this long to start up. I guess I was more patient back in Okay. It seemed to have froze there, so we'll just restart. And hopefully this time it'll start properly. Sometimes it'll freeze and then you reboot into safe mode and then restart and it'll reboot normally, but this is one of those occasions where Windows just being a dick, I think. And this is the Windows ME desktop. It's transferred the settings in from Windows 98, which is all well and good for this process. It should now run its hardware tests, set up anything final that we need it to. Still not entirely sure what that little block in the middle is all about. Again, this process can be a little bit lengthy depending on what's installed, what's connected, things like that. The sound driver is not perfect, but that's fine. Just gonna wait for the last little bits to finish up. And Windows should load. There we go. And that, folks, is Windows 3.1 all the way to Windows ME. So I'm gonna go set up for the next piece, and I will see you in the next video very, very soon.